Check out the full story on Amazon. Link in the description below. Then, Zach came over the radio.
Whoa, Roger, can you back us up on this?
I'm a marine biologist, not an archaeologist. Then Kyle surprised all of us by saying, based on the hieroglyphics and the state of the structure, it's likely a couple 100,000 years old. The closest thing we can compare this temple to is an ancient Roman one, but this thing can't possibly be man-made. Whoa. Where'd you learn that from? Kyle grinned proudly. I paid attention in history class. The one where that pansy-ass bitch kept screaming about how all the history we were learning was propaganda bullshit.
Want to go inside it?
Zach said. I laughed hysterically. Want to go inside it? Let's use horror movie logic. Whenever somebody investigates something strange, they usually end up with their insides getting turned into outsides.
Well, the whole point of this trip is to investigate, right?
Yeah, I guess you are right. But it would be smarter not to investigate, right?
I guess. But let's take a closer look.
Ben drove our submarine right in front of the temple's entrance, and George's submarine did the same. From where our submarine was positioned, I could see that inside the temple there was a giant statue, around 20 feet tall. The statue sculpture thing was a depiction of a monstrous creature. The closest thing I could compare it to was a manta ray, but its mouth was enormous and filled with teeth, and its tail was very, very long. Despite its ray-like shape, it still had some crab-like features, such as 6 appendages surrounding its mouth. There was no indication of any eyes, but it looked like a very good hunter nonetheless. And besides the statue of the ray-like creature, a dozen sculptures of anglers lay standing around it. This meant 2 things. 1, the anglers were smart enough to make structures, and 2, they probably thought of this creature as a god, hence the reason they built this temple. One thought immediately entered my head. Holy crap, that thing is the Deep One. Hey Ben, can you radio Zach again?
Sure, dude. Yep.
Do you see the statue?
Yep.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Probably not.
Never mind. Okay, based on the location of the temple and statue, and based on how the Deep One is heading towards here, I think that the statue is a statue of the Deep One.
Makes sense. Now at least we know what the Deep One looks like.
An hour later, Zach called me up to the headquarters where he and Ben were waiting. What's up, dudes? I said, swinging the door open. Hey, Ben. Take a look at this. Zach said, pointing to the underwater sonar screen. The sonar showed a very large underwater rock formation 10 miles north of our location. It was long, and one part of the rock formation was much larger than the rest. It was 5 miles long, maybe longer. Interesting. I don't know what this is, Zach sighed. The object wasn't there yesterday. It was 60 miles away from us yesterday. Today, it's only 10 miles away from us. Are you saying that weird rock thing is the Deep One? No, we can see the Deep One coming. He pointed at the sonar. It'll arrive in 1 day, Ben said. Zach nodded. Right, and I'm not saying that this object is the Deep One, but it is strange. Okay, but when will the Deep One arrive? 10 o'clock in the morning. Tomorrow. What will we do today? Zach answered, smirking. Explore the temple. To say that my heart was beating fast on the submersible ride down was a huge understatement. Take Mountain Dew, coffee, sugar, whipped cream, 10 energy drinks, and some 5-hour energy and mix it all. Amplify that by 10 times, and you'll feel just about how I felt. And to top it all off, we weren't just going in with submersibles. We were going to explore the temple using specialized diving suits. Freaking, dicking, fucking diving suits. But George supplied us with specialized harpoons in case any monsters wanted to turn our insides into outsides. And to top it all off, the harpoons were tipped with a small explosive device that would instantly ignite if it hit an object with high force. Perfectly prepared, if you ask me. I'd seen wendigos, giant deep-sea leviathans, and anglers, so I knew to be prepared when all kinds of shit wanted to kill you. When we arrived at the temple's entrance, Ben said the words I'd been dreading. "Alright, everyone gear up and prepare to dive." And to my dismay, Zach wouldn't be coming along with us, so we didn't have a monster hunter to kick ass when we were down there. Which was almost always. But instead, Kyle was coming with the dive team. Now that was probably one of the most stupid ideas ever, and I've seen a lot of stupid ideas, but this one was very, very high on the list. But because of all his days in the US Navy, he was a diving expert, and he could shoot a harpoon with his eyes closed. After I'd put on the last of the diving gear, I glanced at Kyle. "Ready?" "Not really, but I can still probably fuck shit up whenever it comes at us." "Good enough." And with that, we turned on our underwater headlamps and both jumped into the black depths. Instantly the cold water hit me, and I regained my senses and got used to the dark water, our headlamps lighting the way. We swam through the entrance of the temple, and God, it was huge. Even bigger than it was on the outside. I swam past the sculpture of the Deep One, and the anglers, following Kyle. Eventually, after 10 minutes of swimming, we came across a huge row of giant sculptures, each one measuring 30 feet tall. The statues were more depictions, some of the Deep One battling octopus-like creatures, and the others were of unknown species. One of them looked like a cross of an eel and a squid, clay tentacles protruding from the sculpture's bottom. Somewhere along the way we found a tunnel. It was 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, and it was crafted into the stone wall. I signaled Kyle to let him know if he wanted to investigate the tunnel, and he nodded. And let's just say that adrenaline was the only thing keeping me conscious. I placed a hand at the entrance of the tunnel, and I pushed myself deeper into it. Surprisingly, the tunnel snaked sharply upwards, and it eventually led to a large open space built into the structure. It was against all means of physics, but at this point, I had seen so much weird shit that I was practically used to impossible things. I took up my mask, and Kyle exited the water, and he stood at the edge of the tunnel, taking off his diving mask. "This is weird." "Yep. What do you suppose this place is?" "A place for unexpected divers to get ambushed." "Oh, really?" "Yeah, dude." And despite what you, the reader, might have expected, we didn't find anything, except for another statue of a gulper eel-like creature. I wondered why those kept showing up. Despite the fruitlessness in the temple expedition, we were still excited for the Deep One's arrival. Especially Alex, but he seemed more excited about the bomb than the Deep One. According to our estimates, the Deep One was going to arrive in 12 hours. In the meantime, we sat around a barrel fire, talking and looking at the stars. The view was amazing, I had to admit. We were out at sea with no buildings, streetlights, or cars to obscure our view, and it was the ass crack of nowhere. So the sky looked like it came from one of those cheesy Alaskan postcards you get from your Uncle Rob. After a great night of talking, eating chips, and having fun, we got ready for the next day. I was awakened when Ben started screaming at me to wake up. What? The Deep One's here!" Ben yelled. Then the realization hit me like a rock. I scrambled out of bed, yelling with excitement and running to the upper decks. "Holy fuck!" "Glad you're awake," Zach said, taking a small button pad out of his pocket. The previous night, he had installed a reverse hydrophone in a certain part of the area, right next to the bomb that would hopefully kill the Deep One. "Where is it?" I said. I could barely hold back my excitement. I was about to see the largest organism to ever, swim the entire planet. Then I spotted it, heading straight towards the reverse hydrophones. To say it was massive was a total understatement. This thing was so huge that it almost covered the whole horizon, and we were facing an open ocean. If I had to guess, the creature was 2 miles long, but most of its body was tail. It looked exactly like the statue depicted. It had the general shape of a manta ray, but had a toothy mouth and crab-like plates covering its head. The creature's tail was very long, so long that I couldn't see the end of it. But then a terrifying realization hit me. This creature doesn't have tentacles. I'll put it simply. The corpse of the Leviathan had tentacle marks. Whatever killed the Leviathan had tentacles. And the deep one didn't have a single tentacle. So the deep one didn't kill the Leviathan. But what did? I didn't have time to dwell on that thought, because I heard a commotion on the upper decks. Just as I ran over to the upper decks, the boat tipped, nearly capsizing. It was as if something massive was swimming underneath us.
"What was that? How am I supposed to know?" "Well, you're the monster hunter. Something's happening,"
Kyle asked. Then he looked at the enormous shadow looming under our boat.
"Oh."
Then we all saw an enormous silhouette in the water, 600 meters wide, and from where I was standing, I could tell it was well over 5 long. I was always taught only to swear at extremely appropriate moments, and I couldn't think of a more appropriate situation to say the S word. Holy Batman fried chicken shit! What is that thing? Oh my god. We weren't expecting this. I don't think anyone was. Suddenly, an enormous monster erupted from the water, devouring the deep one in a single enormous gulp. The closest thing I can compare this creature to is a giant gulper eel, with a mane of large tentacles near the creature's midsection. And holy shit, this thing was enormous. Its main body was very skinny, like a regular gulper eel, but its head and mouth were oversized, perfect for taking down prey much bigger than it. It devoured the deep one with a single bite. Then Zack flipped a switch, and the bomb exploded. You know, the bomb was only supposed to have a blast range of 70 meters. Now 70 meters was very large to a measly human, but to a large being, it was barely noticeable. The original plan was that the deep one would eat the reverse hydrophone, which was attached to the bomb, and then that bomb would explode very close to the head, instantly destroying the creature's brain. But the gulper eel creature was 5 fucking miles long, and this tiny bomb was nothing more than a firecracker that gave a tiny little boop. The whole crew just stood there, dumbfounded and shitless. I don't think anyone wanted to shit. Kyle broke the silence by hiccuping. Then he looked up at the silent and bewildered crowd of people, laughed, and said what we're all thinking. Oh man, we are so screwed. To our knowledge, the creature, which I named the Gulper, hadn't seen us yet. The whole deck exploded into panic because we were directly in the line of sight of the Gulper, and it could easily come and eat us at any moment. Trying not to make too much of a commotion, we slowly backed up the boat, and we went in the opposite direction of home, because that's where the Gulper was at. Once we couldn't see the Gulper anymore, we drove and got the hell out of there. Since the creature was blocking our path back home, and since going around it was too risky, we decided to go ahead and go to the other direction. There was no form of civilization that was located hundreds of miles along the barren coastline. About 30 minutes later, We thought that we went well away from the gulper, so we let our guard down. That was until I spotted an enormous shadow about 6 miles away from us. When the realization dawned upon me, my heart dropped deep into my stomach. Zach? I tapped his shoulder.
Yeah?
Creature's back. What the Zach looked behind us and at the looming shadow. Then he screamed at Captain Carl, "Get to the goddamn island!" At first, I had no idea what Zach was talking about, but then I spotted an island about a mile away from us in the distance. The shore was covered with rough patches of sand, and a thick forest loomed ahead, deeper into it. The boat went into full throttle, and we almost used every ounce of gas we had left in the tanks. We were about 200 meters away from the island shore when the gulper lifted its head and roared. Then it started to chase us. It was pretty fast, if you ask me, but based on the distance between the island and us, and the speed of which we were going at, we should make it. The boat covered the 200-meter distance between us and the island, with the gulper chasing us 600 meters away. When we quickly beached our boat and got onto the shore, we ran as the gulper crashed its enormous head onto it, trying to bite the boat and missing. We almost didn't get out of the way before the gulper's head crashed onto the shore, sending a huge shockwave through the air. It seemed as if crashing its lower jaw onto the island hurt it, like a really stupid person slipping and hitting their jaw on a table. I sure as hell was scared of the gulper, but I also was really satisfied it had to make such a clumsy mistake. After 5 minutes, the gulper slowly retreated into the water, lugging its massive body where it was deep enough to freely swim. Then Kyle stuck his middle finger at the creature, and we finally realized we were actually in some deep shit. We were stranded. Our boat was too damaged to stay afloat, and we were stuck on an island, uncharted, probably filled with God knows what. I sighed as the enormous ripple of the gulper subsided. "What do we do now?" I asked Zach.
"I'm going to stay here, camp out, and stay until we see another boat or plane. Then we can be rescued. We have enough supplies and food to last us a week and a half, so we'll be okay."
"Says you," Kyle said, laughing. "Alright, can I choose who we eat first?"
"Shut the fuck up."
Zach dragged Kyle back to the beach. That night, we stayed up huddled close to a fire whilst eating MREs, which were just dried shits that just passed the line that marked what was and wasn't edible. We heard rustling from just beyond the tree line, so Zach and I checked it out. He drew his combat machete and said, "Hey, Roger." I looked up. "Yeah, man?" "Get your gun." "I don't have a..." He sighed and tossed me a shotgun. I loaded it. What the hell are we even doing?
"We're gonna investigate that sound. It's annoying as hell."
Oh my god, you'd be the first to die in a horror movie.
I've hunted monsters for over a decade, and I survived.
Fair enough. And is this kind of thing going to happen all day? We just outran a 12-mile-long gulper eel with tentacles. I turned to Kyle, who was annoying Ben. "Hey," I said. "We're going to investigate that weird sound over in the extremely suspicious forest." He put on a goofy grin.
"Hope you die."
You know, investigating a random sound that probably belongs to the spawn of hell, just because it's annoying as hell, isn't the best decision. For all we knew, it could be a Wendigo. I turned on the flashlight of the barrel of my tactical shotgun as we entered the thick brush. We went in deeper, to the point where we couldn't hear the group at the shore. The rustling noise was coming from the north, deeper into the thick brush. And let me just say, it was loud. It was as if a 2-ton elephant was jumping around the forest, trying to make as much noise as possible, and all of a sudden, we heard a loud screech that ran through the air. My heart dropped and I looked at Zach. What the hell was that? He frowned.
"Sounds like a Groot slaying."
And with that, Zach walked forwards deeper into the brush.
Zach? What the fuck is a Groot slang? Zach?
I grumbled and sprinted forwards. We broke into a clearing where Zach put his finger up to his lips. He mouthed, "Be quiet."
Out of nowhere, a giant black snake-like creature burst out of the trees, lunging at me. It was about 25 feet long, and its mouth had 2 tusk-like fangs in front of dozens of needle-sharp teeth. It had no eyes, and its head was plated like a Dunkleosteus. I jumped out of the way, whilst Zach slashed at the Grootslang's side with his machete. The creature turned and slithered towards me, whilst I grabbed the shotgun. I aimed for the head, as Zach always said, and fired. Instantly, the Grootslang's head was reduced to nothing more than a bleeding stump. Zach walked up to me. "That's a Grootslang." I kicked the dead creature, making sure it was indeed dead. Excuse my French, but what the fucking fuckity fuck is a Grootslang?
Zach answered. "It's an invasive cryptid that lives in forests and caves. It originated in South Africa, living in caves and underground tunnels. Poachers brought it to North America in 2009, mistaking it as an exotic species of boa they thought they could sell for the illegal pet trade. They usually live in extremely remote areas where humans don't go."
Okay, but you knew it was a Grootslang. Why did you come out here knowing that this thing could rip our heads off?
"Relax, Roger. I've killed Grootslangs before. And I knew you'd be too scared to come, so I lied and played dumb. And we killed it, so we could eat."
Surprisingly, the Grootslang was very delicious.
And after I was done raging at Zach for taking me out there and risking my life, I ate some fried snake monster. It tasted like a mix of steak and chicken, and it was way better than those disgusting MREs Zach had brought. And if you're wondering how we got the 900-pound Grootslang back to our camp, it took a lot of ropes, will, beer, and manpower. And Zach obviously had to know how to fillet and cook a snake, so this was just a bigger version of smaller one. By now, we had brought all the supplies from the boat onto shore, so we were relaxed, sitting around a fire, eating a prehistoric snake monster. "When do you think help will come?" Kyle asked. "Who knows? This isn't a route most sailors and fishermen take." "Okay, that's real cheery. But actually, what are we going to do until someone comes here and picks us up? Survive, I guess?" "That's boring. This is kind of like a summer camp and camping, except there's a bunch of giant snake monsters around and we could die at any moment, and there are no kids here." "Hey guys, hide the kids from Phil." "I guess you're right." And with that, we all called it a night, and went into the beached boat, sleeping in the lower decks. "Hey man." Ben was standing in front of my bed. "Rise and shine, everyone's outside. We all thought you died." "You serious?" "Nah, no one would care if you died anyway." Ben broke into a fit of laughter. I stood up, walked outside, and stretched. It was a bright and sunny day with not a single cloud in sight. On a regular day, this would have been a good thing, but now this meant sunburns and sweat. I walked down the ramp, looking around at the large camp. It was big now. The team had made several fire pits, tents, and shelters scattered along the shore. Zach told me that since I had killed the Grootslang so easily, I might be useful in what he called the expedition. Zach, George, Kyle, Ben, and I would go into the forest, exploring and searching for any possible threats. I didn't want to go, but Zach just slapped me on the back and said, "Make yourself useful." So, somewhere in the afternoon, I found myself hacking away at trees and brush using my hybrid to get through. "This is starting to get boring," I said.
Quit your whining, kid. And besides, what else would you even do on this island? It's boring as hell and only goddamn coconuts to scream at."
"Yeah. Hey, but at least we found out what killed the Leviathan," Ben said. "Been a long ride, right?" "Yeah, that too." And Kyle said, "Eat shit" to a weird gulper eel creature. Then he punched it and flipped it off. Also, why do you think the gulper eel creature wasn't discovered?
I mean, planes and boats would have seen it. This made me stop swinging my sword. Ben was right. The gulper, which was such an enormous creature, would have had to have been discovered by now. It was huge, and unless... Hey Ben, you think the government is trying to keep the gulper's existence a secret? I mean, that would explain all the government agents who come here all the time. Yeah, that would explain a lot of things. We kept on walking until we eventually came across a large clearing. It was about 50 feet in diameter, but the strangest part was that there were several very old tents lying around, and old skeletons strewn about. And some of them were missing limbs, as if something had ripped them off. And the worst part of that, there was a massive and very deep hole in the center of the clearing. Oh shit, something's been here. Zach? Yeah? You seen this, right? Yep. You're thinking of investigating, right? Also yes. Alright. Fuck no. Then we all heard a dick-chilling roar coming from inside the hole. The sound of something massive crawling up the tunnel and towards us. And it wasn't a Grootslang. I'd heard what a Grootslang's roar sounded like, and it sure as hell didn't match the roar of whatever creepy shit was down there. And with that, I turned around and noped the fuck out. Now, I was sure that Zach would be pissed off, but when you see an abandoned campsite with bodies and a giant hole in the ground, and then you hear a roar coming from underground, your responsibility at that point is to get the fuck out in no time. The others caught up to me, and as if this kind of thing happened before, Zach muttered, "Not again." Kyle caught up to me and said, "Dude, what the hell was that?" "I don't know. Where's Ben?" "Oh, he's coming." "Should we get the fuck out?" "Yes," I replied, turning to see Ben, George, and Zach running behind us. "Go!" Zach yelled, and so we did. We went so fast that the 20-minute walk suddenly turned into a 5-minute full-out sprint. The whole time I heard something rustling behind Zach, but I tried to focus on running. Somewhere along the way, the rustling stopped, so we assumed that whatever was pursuing us had gone. We all stopped, catching our breath and gasping our lungs out. "What the hell was that?" said George. "Guys, what was that?" "I don't know, it's not a Grootslang." "Then we should stay away from that place. Why investigate? That's what kills people." "Yeah, you're right." About an hour later, I was back on the beach, cutting tree limbs and having fun being bored as hell. I ate dinner with everyone later. I don't remember what it was. About an hour after that, we went to fucking sleep. "Roger! Roger, wake up!" Zach yelled. "What?" I groggily said. "There's a boat heading our way." I jumped up and rushed outside. Sure enough, there was a small fishing boat heading past the island we were in. Everyone was outside, screaming and waving their arms around. But everyone went quiet when... What happened next wasn't just stupid. It was ridiculous as a pile of shit flying around during a funeral. Using one of our rifles, Cal shot one of the crates on the deck of the boat. We all just stared at him. He looked up. "What, those guys are nearly a mile away from us. They can't hear our voices. We needed a better way to get their attention." I looked towards the fishing boat and, sure enough, through some binoculars, I saw several crewmen looking at our location and yelling something at us. Now I think about it. If Kyle hadn't shot the boat, they were never going to have noticed us. People in the boats drove a little closer, just within earshot. I waved at them. Kyle screamed, "Hey, dipshits, we're over here!" Now I was assuming those fishermen didn't think we were pirates or maniacs. The latter applied to Kyle, because they were coming towards us. When they were within 100 feet of us, one of the crew members screamed, "What the hell are you all doing here?" It must have been a weird sight. A massive fishing boat / research vessel beached on shore with more than 20 people on shore holding guns and screaming. Zach was the first to talk. "We got stranded and our boat stopped working." "You want me to call the Coast Guard?" "Yeah, that'd be great."